بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Inshallah, in today's lecture, we are going to take issues 2, 3, and 4. Issue 2 is to talk about the dominant position within the Sunni or in the Ash'ari school of Usul. In the Mutakallimun school of Usul, that who has established the language. Of course, the dominant position is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established language. We talked about that a little bit in the last lecture. I want to kind of open that topic up a little bit more, and then maybe we can mention some of the differing opinions that are also within our madhab, to talk about some of the implications of that. That's issue number 2. Issue number 3 is we are going to talk about words that have individual meanings, words that have multiple meanings. We're going to talk about synonyms, we're going to talk about homonyms, and we are going to talk about nouns, inshallah. So this is sort of the different parts of speech, and that's also important because we need to know when we come across a word like al-qar' in Surah Al-Baqarah, ثلاثة قروء, the waiting period of the woman after the divorce is 3 quru, 3 qar'. What is the qar'? What does that mean? Is it a period, a menstrual cycle, or is it a period of time after the menstrual cycle? Linguistically, it can mean both. So based on that, we're going to have two different opinions. Imam Shafi'i went one way, and Imam Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu went another way. So this is one of the reasons why we have differences of opinions. And then that was issue number 3. And then issue number 4, we're going to talk about al-ishtiqaq. We're going to talk about conjugation. Now this is a challenging topic to talk about because this has to do with the Arabic language, and we're going to do it in English. But I think the translation, inshallah, that I did holds up. And we are going to make reference to what we call al-ishtiqaq al-kibir, the larger conjugation, which is not part of the matan. It's deep in the hawash and things like that, but it's something very useful for you to know. So this is something that I'll bring up, and hopefully these will be the main topics that we discuss in this lecture. And we'll see you back here for the first one, inshallah. So we will begin the way we normally begin, which is to turn to just to where we're going to start the discussion. Let me just get my page open here. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. مسألة: المختار أن اللغات توقيفية علمها الله بالوحي أو بخلق أصوات أو علم ضروري. So, Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari radiallahu anhu, he says, and may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next. This is issue number 3. Issue number 2. The chosen opinion, al-Mukhtar, the chosen opinion is that languages are established by God, either taught through revelation, or the creation of sounds, or through necessary knowledge. Okay, so that's a lot in that statement. As I mentioned before, and that was a little foreshadowing on my part, there is a difference of opinion amongst the scholars of usul and the scholars of language. I think Imam al-Suyuti in his book on language, on the ulum of the languages, the language sciences, he has a larger discussion of this. There's a difference of opinion of where does the language come from. The upshot, right, the skinny of this discussion is that we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created and established languages. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلِّهَا. But what does that mean? That's where the differences of opinion come. So this is kind of a little bit of me and my commentary to you about how to reconcile the differences of opinion that you'll come across. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establishes the language because Allah ta'ala establishes everything. Allah ta'ala is al-khaliq. It's not like Allah created it, there was no language, and then we made it up and you started making sounds, and then all of a sudden from those sounds we got poetry. I mean, it doesn't work like that. Obviously, Allah established it. There's no dispute of that. But what does that mean? Did Allah Ta'ala teach Adam alayhi salam the actual words of things? This is a shrub, this is a berry, this is a horse, this is a zebra, like that, like the actual words? If so, what language? Or did Allah Ta'ala teach him the concepts, the what we would call the proto-language, the basic concepts of what's useful and what's not useful, what's harmful and what's not harmful, because Allah Ta'ala speaks to Adam alayhi salam and Hawa and Eve, and He gives them instructions not to eat from the tree. So there's a discord, that is language. So obviously Allah Ta'ala established that language. So we say either it comes through revelation, like there are some words that we learn from revelation, or it comes from the creation of sounds that Allah Ta'ala caused Adam and Eve and their progeny to speak. The sound is coming out from your lungs, vibrating through your vocal cords, coming out, etc. Or there is a necessary knowledge, ilm daruri, etc. And then he says something interesting, and this took me some kind of time to find the right translation. And then he says, وَأَنَّ التَّوْقِيفَ مَظْنُونَ. And this is one of the challenges of lub al-usul, is that those are three words that I had to dig in all of these hawashi. What are you actually saying? It's actually a larger concept. So he says, and that this position that we just said, that the lughat are tawqifiyya, that languages are established by God. This position is highly probable, but not certain. Okay? Based on the adillah. Because he just said it can either be from wahi, from revelation, أو بخلق الأصوات, or from the creation of sounds, أو علم ضروري, or necessary knowledge. So that right there shows you that it's not a certain thing. It is highly probable, a highly probable position. But what is certain for us is that if you go back far enough, Allah Ta'ala is the creator. What we're not certain of is exactly what methodology took place. And then he says, وَأَنَّ اللُّغَةَ لَا تَثْبُتُ قِيَاسًا فِي مَا فِي مَعْنَاهُ وَصْفٌ. And this is also very important. Also, the dominant opinion is that language cannot be established through analogy in things with similar descriptions. So the example he gives is khamr. Khamr, in the language of the Quran, when I say the language of Quran, I mean the original usage of the Arabic words at the time of the revelation on the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Al-khamr was something that came from date and grape, or grape, or date specifically. So then you find that grapes make something intoxicating drink, what we call in Arabic an-nabidh. So he says, qiyasan, as analogy, you can't now call the grapes khamr. It's nabidh, it has its own name. But the qiyas is in the hukm. So you do a sharia qiyas, a sharia analogy that, okay, anything that has the quality, what is the quality in the khamr that makes it haram? It's the existence of ethanol alcohol that causes the intoxication. So the existence of ethanol alcohol is the illah, it's the ratio legis. When we come to talk about qiyas, we'll pick up on that immensely, inshallah. So anyway, we find that illah, we find that hukm. So there ethanol alcohol in grape, in grape wine, wines that are grape based? Yes, so therefore it takes the same hukm. So he says, don't confuse that qiyas is the sharia qiyas, that is not the qiyas of language. And that's important because words are words, okay? We're trying to, and this, I can't emphasize this enough. A door is always going to be a door. Up is always going to be up. Man is always going to be man. Woman is always going to be woman. We can't just change the meaning of these words because of some exterior type of situation, because these things have been established for us and used throughout millennia of the human, experience to mean what they mean. Okay, I could go on and on, but this is a class, not a preaching session. Issue number 3, مسألة اللفظ والمعنى إن اتحدا فإن منع تصور معناه الشركة فالجزئي وإلا فالكلي. When words and meanings are united, when a single word and meanings are united, and if in forming this image mentally, there is no associate, then this is a partial word. So if I say Zayd, and I point to a person named Zayd, this is a single word, and it has a meaning. The word and the meaning are united in this kayan, in this person in front of me. There can be nobody else associated with that. So I say that this is a partial word. Otherwise, it's a universal word. So if I say this is a boy in front of me, there is a single word. It has a meaning, but it could apply to many people. It doesn't exclude anybody. We say this is a universal word. Right? So there's a specific word or a partial word, and then there is a universal word. Okay, so far so good. That's pretty simple. Now, kind of down the roller coaster a little bit. متواطئ in istawa. If the universal word, so here he's introducing a new term called mutawati. If the universal word equally applies to all of its subparts, then it is a universal word that fully matches, which is called mutawati. So in the example that I just gave, I say a boy, and all of the boys of the neighborhood come to the class and they're in the room. All of them are equally boys. So the boyness, the meaning of boyness, equally applies to all of the subparts. It doesn't matter that one boy is tall and one boy is short, that one boy is slender, that one boy is full, that one boy has black hair, one has red hair, one has blonde hair, brown. It doesn't matter. What matters is or how they're dressed. Those are different descriptors. But boy, all of the boys in the neighborhood gathered in the class, khalas, then those are all boys. So we say that the word boy in this case is mutawati. It matches. It matches each single one. The next term that he introduces is mutashakkik. So he says, وَإِلَّا فَمُتَشَكِّكْ. Otherwise, if the universal word does not equally apply to its subparts, then it is a universal word that is not congruent with the subparts, and mutashakkik. So, there is a similarness, but they range. If I said, like adolescent or something like that, or young man, and I used a more kind of broader term, then the people that come that would be a mutashakkik. It's not congruent because there would be different ranges of ages in that situation. So mutawati is it's equal to the subparts, and mutashakkik, it is of varying degrees. In the next clip, I'll give you another example of this about a theological debate that stems from this that is important for us to know. So we ended the last clip introducing these two terms, al-mutawati and al-mutashakkik. Al-mutawati is when a universal word is used and it equally applies to its subparts. Al-mutashakkik means that the universal word is used but it's not equally to its subparts. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, of course, in His glory, all of His glory, Jalla wa ala, an infinite amount of attributes. So let's take one attribute like Allah is al-qawi, Allah is the strong. But we can also call a human being qawi, هذا شخص qawi, this is a strong person. Strong here in Allah as a sifa, as an attribute, and strong here as an adjective in a person. Is this mutawati or is it mutashakkik? Is it the same strength or is it of varying degrees? I mean, obviously you can answer that for yourself. Obviously, it's in varying degrees, and that's one of the opinions. Of course, Imam al-Ghazali went another way, and he said, no, they're nothing like each other, because Allah laysa kamithlihi shay. Allah Ta'ala's strength has nothing to resemble our strength. It's not like Allah has 100 parts of strength and we have 0.001% of that strength. That's a theological debate. But it's an example that came to my mind as I was teaching this, as I'm recording this, and I want to show you that these things are not abstract, that they do have practical applications. Okay, so that's al-mutawati and al-mutashakkik. And then he says, وَإِن تَعَدَّدَ فَمُبَايِنٌ. Sorry, sometimes the type is too small for me to read from far away. If words have multiple meanings, then there are general words that require clarity. Mubayin. So, you use a general word and you say, tree. Well, a lot of things can be a tree. Which one are you talking about? Which one are you talking about? It needs to be clarified. So that is a mubayyin, example of mubayyin. أو اللفظ فقط فالمرادف if multiple words have multiple meanings, then they are synonyms. So a word has a meaning A and another word also has meaning A, then the two words that are different are now synonyms. Kid, child. So I could say my kid or my child, my boy, my girl. Those would be synonyms, for example. Obviously, in boy and girl, there's a difference, but you kind of get the idea. So those are synonyms. So when we come across a word, we need to know, is this word a synonym or is it, actually unique? And then he says, وَعَكْسُهُ إِنْ كَانَ حَقِيقَةً فِيهِمَا فَمُشْتَرَكٌ وَإِلَّا فَحَقِيقَةٌ وَمَجَازٌ. So the opposite of this, which is one word with more than one meaning, and the multiple meanings are equally real, then it is a homonym, al-mushtarak. So, one word, but can have more than one meaning. So going back to the theological example that I gave, the dominant position in the Ash'ari school is Allah Ta'ala, in the example I gave, Allah's strength and our strength, this is mutashakkik. Yani they are not in equal levels. But what is assumed is that they are the same nature. Imam al-Ghazali, he said, no, this is from Sabil al-Mushtarak. These are homonyms. They're the same word, but the meaning of strength with Allah Ta'ala is completely different, has nothing to do whatsoever with the word strength as it refers to us. That's important, right? So it's important to have a homonym. So this is, again, because this is a class in Islamic studies and stuff, I'm trying to give you I try to stick to more religious examples or simple examples, but this has huge consequences. Now this is a debate within the Ash'ari school, because Imam al-Ghazali had the latter opinion of it, the mushtarak. And, the teachers that taught me, and I guess by default I just opined, I follow that opinion too, because my teachers, they preferred Imam al-Ghazali's point, because it has more of like adab with it, I can't say that my strength is like Allah's strength, but just a smaller version. I don't want to say that. Laysa kamithlihi shay. And there's room for that opinion according to how we interpret the words, right? That's why we're doing this. So now we have a real live example that's important. So let me just read the last two things. And then he says, otherwise, so he says the opposite of this. The opposite of the synonym means there's one word that has more than one meaning and the multiple meanings are equally real. Then we call this a homonym. Otherwise, the homonyms are metaphorical and actual for each one. So if I say, for example, a lion, and I refer to the animal, that's the real use for in that case. If I say this brave person is a lion, then this is a metaphorical usage. So it's not al-mushtarak because they're not equally real. In this case, one of them has been used for metaphorical purposes. So let me just read this section again. So it's because I was kind of like doing it in staccato style, which is a musical term. So he says, rahimahullah, if words have multiple meanings, then they are general words that require clarity, mubayyin. That's one terminology you need to know, mubayyin. If multiple words have meanings, then they are synonyms, mutaradif. And the opposite of this, which is one word with more than one meaning, and the multiple meanings are equally true, this is a homonym, mushtarak. Otherwise, the homonyms are real and metaphorical for each, meaning that they're not equally real for all cases. And then he says, rahimahullah, وَالْعَلَمُ مَا عَيَّنَ مُسَمَّاهُ بِوَضْعٍ فإن كان تعيينه خارجيا فالعلم شخص وإلا فالعلم جنس. And then lastly he says, Nouns are words that have specific meanings. If these meanings are externally established, then it is a proper noun. So my name is Tariq. So that's a noun, and my parents gave me that name. I believe it was my mother. Allah Ta'ala bless her. So therefore that's a proper noun in this case. Otherwise it's a general noun. I'm a man. Okay? I was a boy and I became a man, alhamdulillah. So that's a general noun. So that should be straightforward. Okay, now the next issue that we're going to talk about, before just jumping right into it, let me make a couple of introductory remarks so that we kind of know what's going on. We know that the Arabic language, like other Semitic languages, usually, not always, but usually words come back to a three-letter root, a trilateral root. Kataba, daraba, fa'ala, etc. It comes back to a three-letter root. And you can conjugate those three letters to create other forms. So daraba is the root with the dad, dara, and the ba, and then you can have darib, the person who hits, madrub, the person who is hit, mudaraba, which is a type of transaction that we have, so on and so forth. That is called conjugation. Now, some of the roots are 4 letters, and in rarer cases 5 letters, and in extremely rare cases 6 letters. But for the purposes of our discussion, we can just think of it as having a trilateral root, which is very simple. Now, to form those other words, this is what we mean by al-ishtiqaq, and this is the subject matter of sarf. A sarf, tasrif, or a sarf is more about the conjugation of verbs. Okay, that's true. Here we're just talking about the conjugation of words and verbs and everything. But that's a separate subject that we study called ilm al-sarf. The science of morphology, of how we conjugate the verbs and the different, the different forms of the verb. This is called al-ishtiqaq al-saghir. In the science of language, this is called the lesser conjugation. There is a greater conjugation in which the 3 letters, fa, a, la, you can rotate the letters. So, a, fa, la, fa, la, etc. You can rotate the letters, and then all of the words that are actual words, because not all of those combinations are real, they can create a meta meaning. And I'll pick this up, inshallah, in the next discussion. So I ended by talking about the greater conjugation, al-ishtiqaq al-kabir, or al-ishtiqaq al-akbar rather, that we are taking the fa, the ayn, and the lam in our generic example and rotating the letters. So fa'ala, la fa'a, afala, ala fa, so on and so forth. Now, most of those combinations will just be gibberish, but some of those will be actual words. So if we take all of the words that share the same root, that's al-ishtiqaq al-akbar, that is the greater conjugation, and then therefore there is a meta meaning that is extracted by those words, all of them together. Which is a very fascinating science. Ibn al-Jinni, for example, rahimahullah, is famous for writing about it in the Khasa'is and other great scholars. Of course, this is not the place for us to discuss it, but Shaykh al-Islam does mention this in the commentary, as do other hawashis in Usul al Fiqh. So I thought, it's important that we just at least mention it, so you kind of have an idea of it. So when you get into the philosophy of language and you start playing around with the greater conjugation, you can kind of produce these meta meanings that I think are important. Okay, issue number 4. Al-ishtiqaqu رد لفظ إلى آخر لمناسبة بينهما في المعنى والحروف الأصلية. Conjugation of words is to revert one word to another due to an appropriate link between the two in meaning and the original root letters. What I meant in this case, like the trilateral roots in our example. So, daraba and darib, obviously they're related, right? They have the same root and they have the same, there's a link in meaning, and to move one to another or to morph one in another is a conjugation. And by conjugation is how we get deeper meaning of the texts that we are reading, which is why this is an important subject. وقد يطرد كاسم الفاعل. Conjugated words can have multiple meanings, like the participle in the sentence. So, or in the subject rather, like darib, the one who strikes or the one who hits. Anybody who hits is going to be called a darib. So, I lost my place, sorry. So in this case, the conjugated word in this case has multiple meanings. It's not specific to one person. وَقَدْ يَخْتَصُ كَالْقَارُورَةِ. Or it can be something specific, like the word qarura, which is a type of glass jar, or glass pitcher. That's something specific. It's not going to have a gazillion meanings. But the subject of the sentence, ismul darib, the person who strikes, anybody who strikes anything. If I just want like this, the person that makes tayammum, that's a darib, the person that strikes the earth, so on and so forth. Or the person who is entering into a state of travel, daraba in the sense of traveling. Again, so that word has multiple meanings. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَقُمْ بِهِ وَصْفٌ لَمْ يُشْتَقَّ مِنْهُ اسْمِ عِنْدَنَا. So, conjugated word, that which has no description cannot be a subject of the conjugation for us Ash'aris. So, there is the relationship for us in the Ash'ari as opposed to the Mu'tazilites, and this has to do with some of the understanding of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They negate some type of the attributes and say that they're part of His dhat, where we affirm those different types of attributes. We talked about that in our theology class. But for us, it has to have a description. If there's a description, then we can conjugate from it. If the word has no description, there is no it is unconjugatable. فإن قام به ما له اسم وجب وإلا لم يجوز. If something has a description, then it must be conjugatable, otherwise it cannot. Okay. والأصح أنه يشترط بقاء المشتق منه في كون المشتق حقيقة إن أمكن وإلا فآخر جزء. The dominant opinion is that after conjugation takes place, the meaning of the newly formed conjugated word is an actual description, even if it's final description. So when I have the root daraba, and then I conjugate from that ad-darib or darib, the one who strikes. Ad-darib, the one who strikes, is an actual description in striking, even if it is what is at the end of the act. So I am now going to be the darib, the one who strikes. So in that case, we say there was a moment before I rose my hand and I hit the book, which I was not the darib. So he says, what does he say? Let me just read it again. The meaning of the newly formed conjugated word is an actual description, even if in its final moment or final description. So at the end, I struck the book. Okay, that's what he's trying to say. Or like a kalam or al-mutakallim, somebody who speaks. So where there are obviously quiet moments when you have to draw breath and things like that, or when you are silent before you open your mouth and then you are silent after it. So we say it's a real description, even if it's in the final manifestation of that. فاسم الفاعل حقيقة في حال التلبس لا النطق. For example, the participle of a sentence means the actual state of the verb at the time of acting, not the time it is spoken. So, when we say something, when we talk about, in this case, the examples we've been given of a darb, the person who strikes, or darb, striking, the participle of it. He's saying that it is the actual verb. It's the actual thing that's being described. In this case, striking. It's a real thing. It's not a description, because it's not reference to when we spoke. It is reference to the act itself. And then the previous sentiment, he said, and that act is real for the duration of the act, even if it's something that is indicated by the end of the act. And then he says, وَلَا إِشْعَارَ لِلْمُشْتَقِّ بِخُصُوصِيَّةِ الذَّاتِ. The conjugated word does not necessarily indicate a quality associated with the original from whence it was derived. So, if you describe something as black, it doesn't limit what that essence of that thing was. Or if I say this is black, like the black bag, it doesn't mean that this has the bagginess in it. It just means it's black, like the black bag, and that's what you understand. So it's not. It does not necessarily indicate the quality associated from whence it was derived. So in this case, it doesn't matter about the bagginess, or that the bag was large and that this bag is small. What matters is that it's black. So that's what we're talking about. But if I say, he says not necessarily. So it can indicate an associated quality depending on the usage of the language. Okay. These are the main three issues that I wanted to discuss for today's lecture. I hope that they're clear, and I hope that with some of these examples, I'm trying to give more and more examples. I realized that in maybe some of the earlier classes it was a little dry with just definitions and whatnot. But examples are very, very important, because examples is how you kind of confirm whether you understand or you don't understand, and whether I understand it to teach it or not. So inshallah, for the next, let's see, how many more do we have? 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 lectures. I will try to do my best to come up with examples when appropriate. The last lecture or two, when we talk about the actual Arabic, prepositions and whatnot, that will be, we'll have to give examples from the Arabic language. There's no escaping that. But I think that they will be straightforward even when they are translated. And with that, we come to a close of today's lecture. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, in today's lecture, we took 3 more issues that are now in the, in this chapter or in this book on the Quran and words and how we understand them, statements, how we understand them. We did issue 2, 3, and 4. So issue number 2 was we looked at al-wada, who establishes language, and we said that the dominant position or the chosen position is the position that Allah Ta'ala established language. Indeed, because Allah Ta'ala is al-khaliq, He created everything. So if you keep going back, Allah established language. What does that mean, however? How did He establish language? That's where there is a difference of opinion, and then therefore that opinion that's the chosen opinion that Allah is establishing of language, we say it is highly probable but not with certainty. Because of where the evidence, how the evidence works, and that's a very important thing. And then we talked about that there's no analogy in language, but there can be analogy based on language for Sharia purposes, like in the alcohol example that we gave. But it's important that words mean what they mean. So when the description of the word exists, and it's very straightforward. We can't just keep sliding the words around meanings, or else we become sloppy in the way we think and what we discuss, which is a lot of the problem of the modern world. Issue number 3, we talked about words that have universal meanings, partial meanings, words that are homonyms, synonyms, words that, and then proper nouns. Those are the main things that we talked about. And we gave some theological examples, hopefully, of how we can apply some of the things that we were learning to real life Sharia examples. And then lastly, for issue number 4, I introduced the concept of the al-ishtiqaq al-akbar, the larger conjugation, and why that's important and kind of interesting. But for the purposes of the lecture and the discussion, we talked about regular conjugation and how it's bringing the words back to their roots. And then we talked about some of the auxiliary discussions about that, about meanings of conjugated words, that it's a real description of the act, even if it's at the end of the act, and it does not necessarily indicate qualities associated from the original from whence it was derived. So see, these are some of the major topics that we talked about in issue number 4, in which we discussed conjugation, which will be hugely impactful when we come to look at actual verses and hadith from the Quran and from the hadith literature of the Prophet ﷺ, as it will be how we understand the meanings will be influenced by what we're learning. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.